I'm Ron Paul. I'm a congressman from Texas, serving in my 10th term. I am the champion of the Constitution.
The Constitution gives us no authority to police the world or get involved in the internal affairs of other nations. Sure, there are a lot of countries around the world that aren't doing the right things. But if we want to change the world for the positive, what we need to do is change ourselves, set an example, and let them emulate us when we get our house in order. We now have an empire. Some won't admit it, but we do. If you have 700 bases outside our country and around the world, that means we are maintaining an empire. All great empires and great nations end because they extend themselves too far. We have weakened ourselves internally because we are now and not a producer, but we are a consumer. Now we have to borrow. We're the greatest debtor of the world. We owe $2.7 trillion around the world. So that is the reason we have to get our house in order, and the best place to start is, of course, undoing our empire and getting all our troops home.
We have a lot of goodness in this country, and we should promote it, but never through the barrel of a gun. We should do it by setting good standards, motivating people, and have them want to emulate us. But you can't enforce our goodness like the neocons preach with an armed force. It doesn't work. Woodrow Wilson was telling us about that in promoting democracy a long time ago. It doesn't work, and we have to admit it.
You'd pull American troops out of Korea, Germany, Middle East, everywhere.
There'd be several reasons. One, under the Constitution, we don't have the authority to just put troops in foreign countries willy-nilly, and we're not at war. I mean, where does this authority come from? The other major reason is we can't afford it anymore. We're going broke. We're on the verge of doing what all great empires have done in the past: spread themselves too far wide around the world, and then they have to come home because the currency is finally devalued and depreciated to the point where you can't afford it anymore, and that's what the markets are telling us right now today.
And now we are fighting a war, and our foreign operations around the world to maintain our empire is now approaching $1 trillion a year. That's where the money's going, and that's where it has to be cut so we can take care of education and medical cares that are needed here in this country. If we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem.
But the big question I remember was, why do they hate us? Remember that? We had about a week where we were all, why do they hate us? And then we just forgot that and went, they're evil. They're evil, we're good. We don't.
They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. Right now, we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico?
You know, if somebody did that to us, we'd be pretty annoyed. Or if the Chinese had military bases on our land or said that they came here to protect their oil, the American people would be pretty outraged. Republicans and Democrats would be joining together. You know?
We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us. You can't discuss energy without discussing our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is designed to protect our oil interests. The profits, that's not the problem. It's the problem that we succumb to the temptation to protect oil interests by literally going out and fighting wars over oil. And now, tonight, we hear that we're not even willing to remove from the table a preemptive nuclear strike against the country that has done no harm to us directly and is no threat to our national security. I mean, we have to come to our senses about this issue of war and preemption and go back to traditions and our Constitution.
And many Republicans strongly objected to what Clinton was doing. He went into Bosnia without a declaration of war. Somalia, nation building. So what was our platform in the year 2000? No nation building, no policing the world. Stay out of the internal affairs of these other nations. And that was very encouraging to me. And yet, we didn't follow those promises. We did not live up to those promises. The promises of the campaign, nor what is implied in the Constitution, nor have we accepted the advice of the founders. I was called to military duty in 1962 during the Cuban crisis, and I ended up being in the Air Force for 5 years. At that time, the Soviets had 40,000 nuclear weapons and intercontinental missiles, and they did have nuclear weapons in Cuba, 90 miles off our shore. Very dangerous times. And what did Kennedy do? He stood firm. He said, we'll not have it. You will get rid of those missiles. At the same time, he calls up Khrushchev and said, let's work this out. Khrushchev said, well, you have them in our backyard. You have them in Turkey. So Kennedy says, all right, a deal. I'll take them out of Turkey. You take them out of Cuba. Now, that ended the great threat. Now, what was so terrible about that? They had to keep that secret for a long time because it meant that Kennedy had wimped out. Yet he saved probably a nuclear holocaust from doing this. What did Reagan do when he said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall? The next week, he negotiated a treaty with them on nuclear weapons. And the day after Khrushchev came over here and banged his shoe on the desk and said, we'll bury you, he drove around in a car, a convertible, with no protection with our president through Washington, D.C. And now they say we're not supposed to talk to the Iranians? I mean, where's our common sense? It is estimated now that our foreign policy and our foreign adventurism and our presence around the world, our empire, is costing us nearly $1 trillion every year. So you can save hundreds of billions of dollars by changing our attitude about our responsibilities. First thing we could do, very simply, just bring all the troops home.
Yeah.
You mean you bring all the troops home from the Middle East? And what would happen? What about our friends? Who are we going to support? You know, we support Israel, and we prop up Arab governments like Saudi government. We've been propping up and protecting a Saudi dictatorship since World War II. And you know, they're not exactly friendly to Christians, and they're not exactly friendly to civil liberties. And yet we prop them up and guarantee their protection, and they guarantee us oil, and they try to keep the oil prices down, and they have promised to invest their dollars back here, and it's been a friendly relationship, except things are getting pretty rocky right now. It's either you do it our way or we'll bomb you, or if you do it our way, we'll subsidize you. We'll give you foreign aid. The third way is just be friends with everybody. Just talk to people. Just negotiate. Just have trade with people. Let people travel. Instead of 40 years of sanctions on Cuba, which has done nothing to get rid of Castro, what about allowing our people to trade with Cuba and travel to Cuba? We're not even allowed to travel to Cuba. Sanctions are actually an act of war. And just yesterday, new sanctions put on the next country that we're getting ready to attack. We have to put on sanctions. Even when we talk with our allies, say, don't do it, don't do it. Talk to the UN, don't do it, don't do it. But here we are putting sanctions on Iran. We are doing the same thing to Iran right now that led up to our invasion of Iraq. We need a policy that would be implemented immediately, quickly, right away, so we don't go to bombing and invading Iran. We don't need that. Those who would be willing to commit suicide and kill us here, we realize that occupation of foreign countries, foreign Muslim country, Arab country, is a strong motivation. But we can't get hysterical about it and think that the war against terrorism is perpetual and they're pervasive and they're around every single corner, and that we are willing to sacrifice our liberties. Now we're at a point where the sacrifice of our liberties is a greater threat to us than worrying about the next terrorist attack. But we have to understand motivation. There is no evidence whatsoever that they come and they want to kill us because we're rich and free. That is not the reason whatsoever. The evidence is overwhelming that it's occupation that counts. I think we treat Israel like a third world country, and that they are not capable of taking care of themselves. we as American taxpayers are obligated to send them $3 to $4 billion every year. Well, you know, why is that? I mean, they're wealthy and they're capable, but they have less incentive to take care of themselves. If we tax our people further in putting us into debt, I mean, they could very easily take care of themselves. Besides, Israel is powerful. They're not going to be attacked by Iran. Let me tell you that. That is not going to happen. Whether Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. The argument is, will they have it in 2 years, 4 years, or 10 years? And we don't even know if that's really what they want. They have a right under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to have peaceful use of nuclear power. And right now, believe it or not, in spite of what you read, they are actually talking to UN inspectors.